Welcome back, everybody, to a Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I'd like to introduce Raymond Posch. He's a spiritual teacher, a folk singer, voice for love and wholeness, author, speaker, podcaster, and talk radio host. After a career as an IT professional and project manager, he now loves entertaining seniors with folk music, helping people grow spiritually, and promoting a saner and healthier world with happier, more awakened people. He is a voice for love, oneness, and wholeness in its fullest meaning, and is committed to spreading that message and teaching the people who want to learn and grow. I sure do, and I'm glad that we are in sync here. Raymond, welcome to a Little Less Fear podcast.
Thank you so much, Leno. I'm happy to be here, and I'm pumped to be talking with a fellow spiritual. Well, I wouldn't say guru. I don't consider myself a guru at all, but spiritual explorer. I consider myself.
Oh, I love that. Spiritual explorer. I got to write that down. We are spiritual explorers indeed.
That's right.
Raymond, there's no coincidence that we are in alignment right now. And I would like to know, and I'm sure our listeners want to know, what brought you to where you are currently at today.
Okay. Well, do you have a little while?
I do have a little while. Yes, we do.
Well, I'll tell you my story. Yeah. So, and we just found out that we were both raised as Catholics and have moved on past that to other things. But yeah, I was raised on a farm in Missouri and grew up with a pretty religious family as a Catholic. But when I went to college, I knew there were things that I didn't completely agree with about Christianity, and it's more than just the Catholic Church, but I just felt that there were some things that did not feel right for me. And I ended up becoming an atheist, which I was for many years, 20 some years. And I was very content as an atheist. And I continued to actually in some ways explore spiritually. Probably not like I ended up doing later, but I was very open to, how does consciousness work? And, how did humans evolve? And, how can we learn to be better people?
Yes.
I was very concerned about all of those kinds of things and had broad interests. And to tell you my story, I ended up coming to a big switch in my life where I switched from being an atheist to a spiritual explorer and a believer in a higher power, which I wasn't really too sure about before. So what happened was, as I said, I was content all of those years. And even now I know, Christians would probably be aghast at anyone who says that they're an atheist, but I know that God is perfectly happy with his creations, and
Absolutely.
that doesn't matter. He knows we're in this world trying to figure it out. And but one day, and I had an IT career, by the way, and later I was a project manager, but for some of those years I was a technical developer type of IT person, and later I was a manager, and I ended up being a project manager for a lot of years, which was a good fit. But at the particular time I'm talking about, I was a software engineer or a systems engineer, and doing interesting work that I liked. Well, one day I was sitting at lunch and thinking, I think I want to go to the computer bookstore and look around a bit. Every once in a while I would do that, but just kind of out of the blue, I decided to go to, it's called Soft Pro, I think it was the name of the bookstore. I went there, and almost immediately I noticed a book that interested me. It was about enterprise computing. And I had, well, I'll tell you why. I picked up the book and flipped it open to a random page and kind of went into total shock because my name jumped right out at me. I had no idea that I was mentioned in that book, but I was. And I had written an article that was published in Software Magazine about enterprise systems, which later became a real thing. You know, I don't know if you know anything about that, but he had quoted my article extensively. But the thing was that I knew that this was something more than just a coincidence. And as it unfolded, it was even more so. I looked at that for a little bit and looked at I thought about, well, should I buy this book just so I have a book with my name in it?
Sure.
And it was $50. Wow, that's an
Wow, that's a
expensive book. And
pricey book.
I didn't buy it. And I ended up leaving the store and kind of, the whole rest of the day and night, I was I had this very powerful feeling that the universe is trying to get my attention, and I'm not real clear about why, but I know that it is.
Yeah, you felt that that was definitely a message. It was a nudge, and you were trying to figure out what that nudge was, where it was trying to take you.
Exactly. Well, so the next day I thought, okay, I'm going to buy the book. I went back to the bookstore and it was no longer there on the table where it had been. And I looked around a bit. It was completely gone. I asked the clerk, well, where did that book go? And he said, oh, well, we put it in a box. It's getting ready to be shipped back to the publisher. And well, I said, well, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
But what I realized at that point was if I hadn't gone when I had, I would not have known that that existed, that I was quoted extensively.
Yeah, even if you would have gone one day later, the book wouldn't have been there. They would have shipped it back. So it was definitely a message for you.
That's right. Exactly right. And I knew even I had been an atheist all of those years, not studying spirituality in any serious way at all. Like I said, I did read books about consciousness and that sort of thing. And I felt open-minded, but something about it just felt so powerful that it was a message to me that there was something about the way the universe works and my role in it that I was being called to wake up to. I felt that it was a wake-up call. And even though it wasn't explicitly, something that, a burning bush
Yeah.
or something like that. I just knew it. And I shifted at that point into a mode of spiritual exploration. I was and kind of in a sense a spiritual junkie, but I was reading books continuously about spirituality, just kind of trying to figure out, well, how does the universe work? What is the message that I'm supposed to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was doing a lot of exploration, not locking in on one specific teacher or thing. I was trying to just get a lot of information and kind of figure it out because I had not been paying attention to spirituality at all. And I knew that I had no interest in the Christian version of spirituality.
Right.
Or the Catholic version.
Sure.
And so I began to slowly accumulate, find teachers who really obviously knew a lot, had written books or had training programs, or some from the past, including Jesus, Buddha, and others that had messages. And I slowly began to figure out what it was, and I would say that what I came away with was believing in a fairly, I guess what I'd call a classical version of spiritual teachings, that it's based on there is one consciousness in the universe from which everything arises.
Right.
Yeah. And, it's not the other way around.
Exactly.
Consciousness doesn't come out of some kind of material complexity. It can only arise out of pure consciousness itself.
Yes.
And so I began, kind of exploring a lot of different things that might help me answer that question. How does the universe work, and what am I being called to do? I felt that there was somewhat of a calling there, even though I had no idea what that would be. So I kept learning, and I studied all kinds of things, just kind of almost anything you can imagine. And maybe you were the same.
I was. Yeah, still am. Yeah.
So, but some of the teachers that really eventually began to stand out to me were Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra. Later, actually in the last year or two, Marianne Williamson was one of those teachers. David Bohm was one who made a big impression on me, because he was a physicist who let's see, I hadn't thought about it in quite a while. His book was about wholeness. I've forgotten the title, but it's the first time I began to understand the concept of wholeness, that the universe is one whole, and that all of creation is one whole, and it's all you could say within consciousness. I mean, it's not like a thought within consciousness, because I believe that physical reality is physically real.
Oh yeah.
But so eventually the pieces kind of came together for me, that one consciousness was key, and the fact that consciousness is primary, that that wholeness is key, that we are all a part of one whole. We are all one. We, even though it's not recognizable, when we look at other people, well, we're
Raymond,
separate. We're separate people.
Raymond, I gotta cut you off real quick, because you said something that's still swimming in my mind, and I'd like to see if you can give me some clarity. You said consciousness is primary.
Yes.
That's amazing. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about consciousness being primary?
Well, it means that there is one consciousness in the universe that is the source of everything, source of our consciousness. Our consciousness is part of that. We are individualized out of that one consciousness as individual beings, but we are still part of a greater whole. And that, in cosmologists, I don't know, how much you've studied in what scientists are learning about consciousness and spirituality now, but it's really come a long ways in the last 20 to 30 years in particular. But it began in the early 1900s with the quantum physicists beginning to understand, wow, the universe is working differently than we thought. We can see that these particles are arising out of nothingness, and we can, through experiments, come to more and more understanding that everything is one whole. It's, even though it looks like we're all separate things, we are still arising out of one universal energy and one universal consciousness. But wholeness can mean a lot. Wholeness includes the concept of oneness.
Okay.
I believe that there's a law of wholeness that says we are all a part of one whole, and we need to, as we grow and become more conscious and more awake, we need to pay attention to the whole, not just ourself.
Right.
The whole is important. And the fact that, some people use the word oneness, the fact that we are all a part of this oneness or wholeness is important, because we need to understand that law that we are all whole, one whole, one being, in fact, in a way, you can look at it that way. And, so much of spiritual teaching and spiritual growth and people practicing their own version of spirituality and learning tends to be very self-centered, focused on how do I learn to be awake? How do I learn to be a better person? But if we begin to understand that we're all a part of this great whole, and the infinite intelligence or universal being or God or whatever you want to call it, has a vision for how he would like to see or she would like to see the universe unfold. And when we begin to understand that, then it really begins to change a lot of things, because eventually we have to realize that that infinite intelligence or God is entirely good, entirely beneficial.
Yes.
What I know is that if the universe was not held together by love, and I believe that love has a power that does that.
And love is
it
infinite intelligence.
In other versions of the universe could all fall apart because nothing holds it together. You have to have something that holds it together, and it's love is that role, because we are all arising out of consciousness, and we are conscious beings. In fact, God teaches that, we can get into specifics later, but God teaches that everything, even the smallest particle in the universe, is conscious. And so
all of matter, everything.
Once we begin to see the universe, how it works to the benefit of everything within the universe, if we cooperate, and if we align ourselves with that, all kinds of miracles and fantastic things begin to happen, as I think you understand very well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, at any rate, so that's what got me started. I've over the last 20 some, going on 30 some years, I've explored spirituality, deeper and deeper, and I still am a spiritual explorer. And I have a podcast called Our Spiritual Life that's I've been doing for 3 years, that goes into all of that. And I also have my episodes are published not only on my podcast, but on a talk radio show called, what is it called? I'm just drawing a complete blank here.
No problem. It's okay.
News for the Soul.
News for the Soul. Oh, I love that. Yeah, News for the Soul.
It's on newsforthesoul.com. It's not something I think about all the time, but so my content gets published on both, and newsforthesoul.com has been operating for I think since the early 70s. So they've been around a very, very long time. They have a huge audience of a lot of people that, are exploring spirituality too. So, but that's kind of what I do. And I can tell you a little bit more. I'm doing some new things as well.
Raymond, how has your life changed from being an atheist to now being a spiritual explorer? I mean, what has changed? What are the major things that have changed in your life since finding this out for yourself and for everybody around you?
Yeah, well, I would say probably the biggest thing that changed was when I was still a Catholic boy, and being guided by my parents and to some degree the church, uh, and I believed in that kind of God, um, but some of it just did not make sense to me. How could a loving God create a hell? You know,
Right.
and
Exactly.
a number of other things that just did not make sense. But what I eventually came to understand, this concept of wholeness is so huge. It's so all encompassing and so powerful. Once I got that idea that everything is a part of this great whole, and it's if I look at it as God, it's a beneficent God, or if I look at it as this all-powerful intelligence, it's a beneficent intelligence. It's things began to make more and more sense. And in to the degree that I could answer to myself a lot of questions that I had,
Yeah.
how could a God create people and then punish them in hell for eternity?
Right.
You
Right.
know, it made zero sense. But I came to realize, well, no God that is operating from wholeness would create a hell, would allow such a thing as a devil to exist.
Exactly.
Now, I did believe all along that God, when he creates people or things or other creatures,
Uh-huh.
animals, they are individual, but they are individuated parts of the universal consciousness. So
Kind of like fragmented.
that makes us we're not ever totally separate from God. We are part of God, and everything is a part of God.
Yes.
Right. And so everything then begins to make sense as coming from one great whole. It doesn't require this magic of how do you get this creature with a brain so complex enough that it finally can create consciousness. No, consciousness is primary. It comes first, and it creates the material world, the physical world, and uh, many people might struggle with that, but somehow I've always been able to deal with some abstract kinds of ideas. So I've believed that from the beginning. But it's so that the wholeness aspect for me has been very big, and I think it's continues to be big for me because it is a fundamental for me. Everything arises out of this wholeness. And if I'm struggling with something, and by the way, even though I've been a spiritual explorer over the years, I've had ups and downs and times when the law of attraction was not working for me,
Yeah.
and things were not making complete sense to me, and I was not hearing God's voice. I could understand it from the perspective of wholeness, and that I'm this individual individuation, and I have a free will, and I'm I've made the choice to have this human experience on Earth, and it's a learning experience. I'm
Yes,
here to
indeed.
learn
Exactly.
specific lessons that can help me be a more perfect spiritual being. So, when things aren't going right, then I can step back and eventually wake up to the point, oh yeah, I've got to realize that the problem's in me. It's in the way I'm thinking. I have to change the way I'm thinking. And as I do that, and the more that I do that, then I shift back into the path that I'm looking for,
Right.
the kind of growth and the kind of life that I'm looking for. So it's been very, very big for me.
Raymond, can we go back to the concept of hell? I mean, you being a spiritual teacher and so many more years of experience in spirituality than I do. Where does the concept of hell come from? Do you know this? Or do you have
Well,
any idea of that?
yeah, I have one basic idea. It could, uh, well, I think there's a couple of answers. So let me try to state those. One is the path that we've ended up following, the majority of all human beings up to this point in time. And I think at this point in time, we're invited to awaken more to the reality of the universe and the reality of God and the fact that we are a part of God, awaken to our divinity, if you will. That can help shift things. But what we evolved in a time when it was a challenge to stay alive as cavemen,
Yeah.
or living out on the savannah, where there was life-threatening things all around us. And so we've been instilled from the very early days of our level of intelligence or awareness, that fear, that there's a lot to fear. And
Sure.
so we've developed this ego mechanism that is mental programming that basically it maintains that fear, but it tries to protect us in some ways, but it's still fear-based. And because when we're reacting to fear all of the time, and most people are that way,
Oh yeah.
and I can expand on why. Ego's a bit more complicated than that. It's a mental construct, and it also is evolves because we think all the time, and we spend a lot of time thinking about everything that can go wrong.
Yeah.
How we defend ourselves and what kind of lie can we make up to justify our existence, et cetera, et cetera. That's that fear-based thinking. We can create our own ideas that are like hell,
Yes.
in a way. But I believe that the Christian church, the Catholic Church, in the early days, 300 AD, when it was really coming into form, they realized that, well, how can we have people that follow the religion and follow the rules? They have to be, it has to be fear-based, punishment-based, because that's the way the world works. Kings punish and leaders punish, and so it was all punishment-based. And they created the idea of hell. And actually, I did some research. I know that the idea of hell was a Jewish idea that was there long before the Catholic Church formed. Yeah. So it's been around a long time, and I think it comes out of that fear-based mentality.
I have a question though, but don't most, if we can picture something and create it, doesn't that sometimes mean that it exists? So I'm wondering, as you're speaking, like I've seen some beautiful art at museums that sometimes, show images of the devil or angels or God. And these images are very clear and they're very descriptive. And I feel like, well, where do these images come from? Like, where does this horned man with a long tail, pointy tail, like, what and why has it been depicted this way for thousands of years if it doesn't exist?
Well, I think it is, we have the power with our minds to create ideas, which in modern terms, in the last, 10 or 20 years, whatever it's been, where the concept of a meme, we can create that idea so powerfully that it becomes implanted in our very being, in our consciousness.
That's true.
Yeah. Now, God, uh, there have been lots of people who have conversations with God, and you may be aware of the books Conversations with God
I
by
have, yes.
Neil Donald Walsh, Neil Donald Walsh, uh, and those do come from conversations with God. I believe that totally. I've believed it from the very first that I read in the first book of that series, and and God has always answered the question, well, why are we taught about the devil and hell? And God has made it clear those are not ideas that come from God, and they do not exist in reality, but we can create our own reality.
Yeah.
That, it may be divorced from, in a way, from physical reality, but it is our reality because we accept it and believe it totally. And then because we do that, we create a life that fulfills that. We have the power to create. God has told us that over and over again. We have the power to create. And that's how it comes about. And and I believe it became such an implanted idea, even with certain, the this idea of a devil appearing in a certain form, a certain way. I believe that that's the way it works. But God, in teachings in Modern Messenger, says absolutely no. There is no hell. There is no devil. But any given person has the ability to create hell for themselves,
Yeah.
and to create the devil for themselves. And that's the power of our
Free will.
creative capability. We just have to learn to use it in the right way.
I agree with you on that, Raymond. It's interesting because I mean, even when I was raised Catholic and stuff, whenever I hear about, devil stuff, I never really felt that to be true. I was like, why do I have a feeling this isn't true? Like, I just don't, it's not true for me, at least not for my reason for existing has never been to create any type of devil imagery. I've never been fascinated by the devil,
Yeah.
and never have I felt the
But you
presence of the devil. I just, yeah, I never felt that to be true.
but you know the yeah so the I it's my understanding that both the Christian and Jewish faiths have used that fear of hell as a mechanism for their religion to enforce to try to enforce a certain behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the people won't be good if you don't scare the hell out of them or scare the hell into them,
Yeah.
uh, and in our fear-based mentality, as long as we are operating from ego rather than love, and I do see those as opposites. When we're operating from ego, we are operating from fear.
Yeah.
And fear can be very, very powerful. I've had periods in my life, including not too long ago, a year or two ago, some business things that I had tried did not work out, and I had accumulated a lot of debt, and I was operating from fear because I was trying to make something work that I could create an income and pay off that debt. But just because I had so much debt, I had lots of fear until some very specific spiritual things happened for me that helped me turn that off. So yeah, fear is very powerful.
How did you turn that off?
Well, in my case, I continue to explore spirituality all the time and try to have a deeper understanding, and learn more about people and how we need to evolve. Particularly now, to change the world. I do believe we've come downwards for enough period of time here over, like over the last, it's been a continuous process, but over the last 10 or 20 years, we had been kind of learning some lessons from those world wars and trying to change our ways. And then now we seem to be backsliding and having more violence and more war, et cetera. And I think we're at a tipping point where we need to make a choice as a species. Are we going to learn to live as one whole, as a species that works together? Because if we don't, we will continually destroy ourselves, be at war, right, and we will destroy our own civilization. So I think change is needed, but I lost my train of thought there. Where were we going with this?
That's okay, because I have a question, if you don't mind me taking you back to talking about ego.
Okay.
Okay, so I have my doctorate in clinical psychology, and we learn a lot about the ego, a lot of different theorists and a lot of psychologists and stuff, and sometimes we've learned that there's a healthy ego. There's a healthy ego and unhealthy ego.
Mm-hmm.
In a spiritually inclined world, and for this conversation's sake, would you say that there's such thing as a healthy ego?
Well,
Or is all ego fear-based, and is it all bad?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's very important to understand that the psychological ego concept,
Yes,
is something different than the spiritual ego concept. Now,
oh yeah, let's get in it.
Yeah, they overlap. They're not, two totally different things. They overlap. So the psychological ego is the core part of it is important because it is based in our personality. Okay. And every one of us, we're individuals because God wanted to have individuals with their own minds, their own personalities. God somehow was smart enough to know that if we didn't have that, then we'd all just be robots. We'd be
Right.
Uniform and all doing the same thing the same way. No, because creation is such a part of life. We are very different. And so ego is our personality. There's mechanisms to protect ourselves at some level, to have a good view, of ourself, esteem, have esteem for ourselves. But when we talk about spiritual ego, it is a mental construct that goes too far, and it accumulates over time. And in fact, we start out in the world as babies, as pure self. Mm-hmm. And soul based. Our soul is there within ourselves. And then as years go by, when parents and teachers and so on teach us, oh no, you can't do that, you've got to behave this way, and we get this mental programming that continues to build up over time. And when it really becomes bad is when we identify with our thoughts. Like we identify with the thought that we're a bad person.
Right.
Or we identify with the thought that, oh, that's something I can't do. Mm-hmm. I can't do that. And we automatically shut ourselves off from some potential capability, right, because of that. But so ego, and another key aspect of spiritual ego is it's totally based in separation. Okay. That you are separate from me, and I'm separate from you, and I'm separate from everybody else. Therefore, I have to, and there's kind of something that goes with it, and that's the idea that we need to compete. Right. It's separation and competition kind of go hand in hand, but they really should be separate ideas. But so at any rate, because of separation, then we have to beat other people out, maybe for those resources, oh, if I want to make that money, I want to be the more successful person. I want to see myself as totally successful, having everything I need, everything I want. And so because of separation, particularly separation, the belief in separation from God,
Mm-hmm.
we become very selfish, self-centered, and it goes way too deep, way too far. If we understood that we were all one whole, that you and I are a part of the same wholeness, oneness.
Right.
Why would I do anything that would harm you?
Exactly.
Because I'm harming myself. We're all part of one whole. So that's why the concept of wholeness and understanding the reality and truth of it is so important. But so spiritual ego is different than psychological ego. I mean, and people sometimes get confused because they think they're one thing, and
I was confused. I mean,
they overlap.
Yeah.
They overlap,
Yeah.
but there's some distinct differences. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for clearing
Sure.
that up. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've studied this stuff for a long time, trying to answer these questions myself. So I don't claim to have all the answers by any means.
Sure.
I get confused at times too. Well, I wonder, why is this happening? Yeah.
Raymond, I have a question for you.
Okay.
If you can go back to the time where you were an atheist and just living your life that way with no spirituality, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself? There's a time machine and you can go back tonight. What would you tell your then self?
Well, I would tell myself that the that's a big question when you really think about it. I know what my answer is. I'm thinking out how I should explain it to you. It comes from that wholeness. I would say that, Ray, the atheist, you see the world in a certain way. It's somewhat black and white. It's very limited. What I have learned over the years is that we are part of something big and powerful, this great wholeness of people and the world and the universe. And the more that I've learned about it in my life, the more I see what I missed from being just in those days of Ray the atheist.
Yeah.
I was happy with myself, and I was kind of mostly concerned about my own self and how do I get along in the world and be more successful. But that's a kind of a shallow point of view, and that Ray, there is so much more to the universe. It's so deep and complex and beautiful and good. And the more that you can accept and explore into that, because all this came to me through spiritual exploration. It was not one book that I read, that had all the answers.
All the answers. Yeah.
No, you have to keep being open, exploring what the world is offering and
Right.
how you can best participate in the world. And what I've come to realize is that I'm here not just to serve myself, but to serve the whole. To serve, it may be some part of the whole. I may not reach the whole universe. I may not reach every person in the world. I may reach only a handful of people. And but I'm here to do what I can for helping the whole thrive,
I love
because
that.
that's what we're about. And so that's
Helping
what
the
I
whole
would
thrive.
that's what I would offer to that old self, that there's so much more, that we're here to help the whole thrive, not just one little me.
I love that. And I had to write that down. Helping the whole thrive. Raymond, this has been an amazing interview. I'm so blessed that we connected. I love these in-depth conversations. Where can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners find you, your podcast? And if they have any questions, any spiritual questions, how can our viewers, our watchers, and our finders find you?
Okay. Yes. So my podcast is Our Spiritual Life, and you can find it on the 5 or 6 of the largest podcast platforms like Spotify and Stitcher and Apple and Google. I'm not on all of them. iHeart is one that I'm on. And my episodes are also published on newsforthesoul.com. There are many different programs that are offered on newsforthesoul.com, and it's the way they publish it is by host. So under the hosts, I am Raymond Posch, Posch, and you can find it through that, but it's the same information that's on my podcast. I do have a website that is raymondposch.com, and I'm just in the process of launching something new that's called Evolution Unfolding, because evolution of consciousness I know is unfolding, and that's such an important thing. And I want to help people participate in that. So that's what that's going to be about. And I can be reached at ray@raymondposch.com. That's really the best way to reach me via email. And I did have an option where you can connect with me on my website, but I've taken that down right now. So maybe I'll get that back up at some point. But if you contact me via email, I will respond, and we can carry on a conversation.
Awesome, Raymond. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for being on A Little Less Fear podcast. I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and I'm sure I'll reach out to you whenever I've got some spiritual questions that are burning inside me.
Lino, it's been fun being here with you today, and I'd love to have more time chatting with you. I fear that I dominated the conversation, but you were asking questions that I had.
Well, you're supposed to dominate it.
So
you were supposed to.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays to you. Happy New Year. And we're keeping in touch, Raymond.
All right.